Well, this is, the purpose of this report was really to identify the important economic and social second wave. I think a lot of people are still, happy and rejoicing about the haphazard reopening that we've seen. It's going well, especially in the manufacturing sector, maybe less in the services sector. But what we wanted to highlight is the risk of policy mistake down the road, especially when we transition out some of these emergency policies, such as short-term placement, because we believe that some of the companies are now in a situation where after 3 months of so-called no turnover, no revenue stream, will they get out of this situation? We don't know. And so we wanted just to think about those late bloomer sectors, we call them this way in the sector, which are construction and transport and hospitality and retail, which are going to have a hard time for the remainder of 2020. And we're saying, look, it's great that you put those jobs on hold and that you keep the relationship between employer and employees, but maybe some of these companies will actually not emerge out of the crisis. And so we wanted to show the trade-off between creative destruction, like what's happening in the US, and protective destruction, which we think is happening in Europe.
Ludovic, some of the critics of all of the emergency response make the point that no company is allowed to fail at this point. Do you think the appetite for rescuing hard-hit companies is just simply going to wane at some point, where authorities, where governments to central banks will say enough is enough, and that these hard-hit areas of the economy, from travel and leisure to tourism that you mentioned, won't get the support down the track, say in 12 months' time, if they still require it?
So that's exactly the issue, right? I believe that this was a good policy to do, especially in the emergency situation. But we believe you have to complement this with other policies for those sectors that are going to be in protracted crisis mode. If you continue just giving incentives for people to be in partial unemployment schemes, this is not enough for, boosting mobility from one sector that is maybe in a difficult situation for a year or even 18 months to another sector, which is much more productive and much more upbeat. So what we're saying is that be careful about rigidifying the labor market and try to top up with active labor market policies, focusing on intermediation, requalification for those sectors that are actually on life support right now. Because if it is only about life support, then policymakers have to budget it for all the way till mid-2021 or even end of 2021. And this is a very high bill to foot.
Ludovic, it's Juliana here. I mean, you alluded effectively to the difference between the U.S. system and the European system, implicitly anyway, the fact that Europe has gone with this protected destruction approach. Does this all mean that the U.S. is going to end up better placed because people have been let go from jobs, which frees them up to take advantage of jobs in the fast bloomer types of sectors that you talked about?
Well, I believe that in the short run, Europe is much better positioned because you try to avoid, at all costs, any type of social, upheaval. And so I think that was a good policy to do. My question in the midterm is that more flexible, more agile economies are usually better off because you have this process of going towards high productivity jobs, because you have the option, for people, you don't protect jobs per se, you protect workers by incentivizing them to go to highest paying jobs. And so I don't know, actually, that's a very open question for economists to know in this crisis, which is very peculiar, whether wage subsidies or topping up unemployment benefits like the PPP program in the US is the better one of the two schemes. I think the European scheme is the best one, even though we have 60 million workers in Europe currently on some form of wage subsidies. So it's very costly, but I think it is a better one if you actually phase it out and you identify some additional policies to make sure that people don't stay stuck in some of these jobs that will take 18 months to actually resurface, right? So it is really about how do you manage this, the next 3 or 6 months to make sure that you re-incentivize some of the job creation and you avoid any type of, vicious circle whereby some of the people in companies in Europe actually keep their people to protect their cash flow or keep their people just because there is no other thing to do. And this is just, what life is about. And then those people become very distant from their jobs and become less employable. So I don't have an answer on which one is better, but I intuitively think that the more flexible scheme is actually a bit better in the medium term to unleash a bit this human capital back to the economy.